During their golden era, Bally Manufacturing produced far more than mere arcade games. They literally orchestrated the background noise of everyday stateside culture. You could find them in any slice shop, bowling center, flight hub, washateria, or local dive stretching from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast. A Bally cabinet would be lighting up the back of the room, paddles clacking, targets dinging, and countless 25-cent coins vanishing into the slots. During 1979 specifically, stateside arcade manufacturers moved 200,000 units, a staggering 200,000. Picture the whole citizenry of Akron, Ohio transformed into metal, and screens then dropped right into almost any communal hangout across the nation. Bally produced a massive chunk of those cabinets, yet before 10 years even passed, the whole operation vanished. No gentle fade-out, no elegant exit. They collapsed exactly like mighty kingdoms do whenever their leaders forget the core magic that originally brought them their phenomenal success. That massive plant over on West Belmont Avenue out in Chicago, which hosted thousands of daily employees for 50 years, got auctioned off, gutted, and completely leveled. You will not find a commemorative marker. Nobody built a tribute hall. Absolutely zero remains. Just ordinary residential homes sit where an absolute titan once operated. What follows is the tale of the globe's arcade kingpin, its rise, its absolute dominance, and its ultimate self-destruction. Part 1. The guy hailing from Cleveland. We are talking about Raymond Thomas Maloney. He entered the world on November 2nd, 1899, right in Cleveland, Ohio, a gritty town famous for manual labor and zero regrets about its blue-collar roots. His dad toiled in the local metal foundries, definitely not in management, but as a regular dude clocking in before dawn and returning totally exhausted. Raymond grew up firmly planted in that harsh reality. Higher education was never in his cards. He chose the road instead, pitching in at Texan petroleum rigs, gathering crops out in California and processing sugar down south. Just a constantly moving drifter without any real end goal in mind. He returned home during 1921, tied the knot with Carmelia Shader, and grabbed a supervisor gig at his dad's workplace. Reliable income, routine existence. He considered it absolute imprisonment, so he packed up and walked away. He relocated to Chicago, a city hosting over 20 arcade enterprise headquarters packed tight within a tight radius featuring giants like D. Gottlieb and Company alongside Williams Manufacturing. That clustering happened for a very specific reason. The Windy City served as the nation's biggest train junction. Any cabinet assembled on a Monday would easily hit a Texas storefront before the weekend. Throw in a local labor pool loaded with guys skilled at slicing steel, carving timber, and molding panels. The city was not merely an okay spot to launch an amusement enterprise. It was literally the only viable option. Maloney signed on with Line Manufacturing over on 308 West Erie Street, hustling as a sales rep. He never actually constructed a single device there. Instead, he observed closely, figuring out exactly which items flew off the shelves and which ones flopped. Then the October 1929 crash happened. Wall Street tanked. Once 1933 rolled around, a quarter of the country's population found themselves entirely jobless. Surprisingly, though, low-cost amusement skyrocketed. Whenever your pockets are completely empty, coughing up just 1 single cent still delivers a tiny thrill. Just a brief moment of flashing lights, loud sounds, and the sheer hope of a lucky break. During 1931, Lion started peddling an amusement box from a maker known as D. Gottlieb and Company, named Baffleball, and purchase requests absolutely poured in, hitting over 50,000 units in mere weeks. Vendors rang the phones off the hook, demanding stock that had not even been built yet. Maloney worked the supply side of things and quickly calculated the true potential. Since the ultimate heavyweight in the game failed to meet demand despite operating their assembly lines at maximum capacity, the consumer base was not simply waiting, it was practically begging for more. Part 2. Lifting a title right off a newsstand. Raymond Maloney possessed zero engineering skills. Corporate fairy tales usually polish away the ugly truths. Our guy never drafted out ballyhoo on some random diner tissue. Instead, he simply hired a pair of creators, specifically Oliver Van Tuyl and Oscar Bloom, to figure out all the moving parts, bought the rights to their ingenuity, and slapped his own signature onto the whole business operation. Yet the distinct flavor he brought to the table outweighed any technical copyright by a mile. While strolling by a local Windy City paper rack toward the end of 1931, Ballyhoo magazine caught his eye. a comedy rag famous for its loud, cheeky front pages. He shamelessly jacked the title, the vibrant vibe, and the overall swagger. The arcade box adopted that exact moniker, featuring blazing neon-level graphics you literally could not miss from 50 feet away. He did not engineer the hardware, he engineered the irresistible pitch. That remained his true genius. On January 10, 1932, Bally Manufacturing Corporation legally became a real business. The financial backing rolled in from Joe Lennon alongside Charlie Welt. Both were his old Lion co-workers from the publishing side, totally unconnected to amusements. They viewed this as a quick gamble on a passing craze. Years down the road, the founder admitted that branding the entire firm after their debut launch showed a real lack of vision. He honestly never expected the gig to explode the way it did. The guy was incredibly mistaken. The initial Ballyhoo unit retailed for $16.50, which shakes out to around $315 in modern cash. Just 1 single cent scored you 7 shots, while 10 cents bought a cinema ticket, a mere penny unlocked a round of Ballyhoo. The device itself ran on absolute bare-bones mechanics. Measuring 31 inches across and 16 inches deep, it lacked power cords and featured 0 paddles. You just pulled a spring to fire a metal sphere over a level playfield dotted with iron nails and 10 target cups. The ultimate jackpot sat dead in the middle. Gravity and momentum handled the entire outcome. Over those initial 7 months, the newly minted Bally pushed over 50,000 cabinets, despite dropping them into a depressed nation battling 25% unemployment and straight into a territory Gottlieb already dominated. Before 1932 wrapped up, a follow-up hit named Goofy started rolling off the assembly line. Then Airway hit the streets during 1933. Their workspace over on 308 West Erie Street felt completely suffocating. By December 1933, barely 2 years from their start, Bally relocated to a massive 50,000 square foot 3-level facility situated along 4619 North Ravenswood Avenue. Most entrepreneurs grasp this harsh reality way too late. Your initial product gets things going, but the surrounding team actually builds the empire. Maloney formed the legendary squad that folks eventually dubbed the Four Horsemen. James Buckley handled the pitching-hopping rail cars to meet local suppliers coast to coast, ultimately weaving a countrywide web. Patrick Mallet transitioned from Grigsby Grunow radio, injecting serious assembly line order into a workspace practically begging for organization. Herb Jones spearheaded marketing, hammering a solitary concept into storefront proprietors' heads. This contraption literally prints cash. Maloney actually coaxed his dad Daniel, a retired Cleveland steelworker, back into the workforce just to oversee the massive Ravenswood relocation. The rivalry felt heavily lopsided. Gottlieb possessed 5 solid years of background. Meanwhile, Rock Ola Manufacturing, established that exact same year by David Rowla, jumped into flippers, releasing Juggleball, dumped $120,000, pivoting entirely toward jukeboxes. Williams remained completely non-existent, holding off launching until 1943. The real brawl boiled down to Gottlieb against Bally. Mullen's edge wasn't technical genius. He simply offered cheaper tags alongside a brilliant understanding of consumer cravings. He was hardly the smartest guy present, yet he grasped the crowd perfectly. Chapter 3. The Belmont Facility. Approaching 1935, Bell completely outgrew 2 production centers. The Erie Street spot survived under 12 months. Ravenswood bought them crucial time while customer orders absolutely skyrocketed. Consequently, during 1935, Maloney launched an additional site, cementing the brand's legacy for 50 years. 2640 West Belmont Avenue, sitting in Airedale on Chicago's northern edge, nestled right between Washington and Rockwell. A glowing neon ballet logo illuminated the front exterior. Marking the western edge stood the Balletman, an 8-foot steel statue mirroring that iconic atomic age graphic branded onto all ballet game aprons throughout the 1970s. Just opposite the main road, 2 compact structures manage component storage, alongside the printing station crafting those colorful backglass designs. Merging the Erie, Ravenswood, and Belmont spaces equaled over 125,000 square feet, easily dwarfing 2 football fields. Fast forward to December 7, 1941, mere days following the tragic Pearl Harbor attack. National authorities pivoted civilian industrial plans toward military output. Bally declared their own defense agreements by January 1942. Once 1943 hit, arcade assembly entirely ceased. The Belmont crew worked full shifts churning out explosive primers alongside weapon optics. Zero flipper cabinets ever exited those doors. Ironically, that global conflict era became Bally's absolute strongest economic stretch to date. Federal deals settled up punctually, providing way juicier profits than CoinOp could possibly match. Concurrently, Maloney stared down a tough choice. Most local Windy City gambling fabricators migrated toward Nevada, fleeing increasingly strict Midwestern laws. Maloney flatly declined. He refused to slash 500 positions, merely chasing luckier environments out west. This stubborn stance eventually sacrificed massive industry foothold for years. The reason being, whilst Bally crafted rifle sights, municipalities nationwide started prohibiting flipper games. Illinois completely banned them back in 1937. Los Angeles mirrored this during 1939. Voters cast 161,000 ballots supporting the crackdown versus 113,000 against. Come January 21, 1942, New York's Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia commanded massive sweeps spanning every single borough. Cops confiscated roughly 2,000 cabinets, aggressively destroying them using heavy mallets. LaGuardia announced to reporters that the trapped coins essentially represented stolen cafeteria funds from innocent youth. Arcade gaming supposedly paved a direct path toward delinquency. The exact metropolis producing most global cabinets outlawed citizens from actually playing them locally. Following the peace treaties, Bally peddled practically anything consumers desired. Mechanical pony attractions parked near pharmacies, bingo boards, and automated snack dispensers. The corporation even took a quick swing, launching Bally Records, an imprint that completely flopped without leaving a trace. Furthermore, throughout 1951, lawmakers enacted the Johnson Act, strictly forbidding cross-country transport involving any wagering hardware. Conflict in Korea squeezed them even harder straight through 1953, skyrocketing the expense of steel, timber, and glass, the essential ingredients for flipper cabinets. Mullen maintained operations regardless, ensuring his crew stayed employed. He passed away on February 26, 1958, at exactly 58 years of age. Ownership shifted directly to his boys Don and Ray Jr. Sadly, neither possessed their dad's grit. Scarcely 5 years later, Lion Manufacturing completely collapsed into insolvency. Ball hemorrhaged cash while completely losing its compass. Luckily, by 1963, a syndicate spearheaded by veteran Ball staffer William O'Donnell snagged the entire operation for $1.2 million. That massive Belmont plant, their countrywide connections, plus 30 years of public recognition, all handed over for a mere $1.2 million. Desperate liquidation or an absolute steal? Inside 10 years, everyone finally knew the truth. Chapter 4. Money Honey alongside the casino terminal uprising. William O'Donnell definitely lacked any background as a researcher or technician. He remained a pure hustler who witnessed Bally coasting aimlessly for 5 years post-founder. So once the opportunity arose to snatch it up for $1.2 million in 1963, he struck hard. He sized up Bally's actual assets, a severely neglected production hub situated off West Belmont, paired with an expansive nationwide supply web. Literal decades worth of fabrication potential sitting there. Furthermore, Illinois recently relaxed betting laws, while Nevada's resort floors were actively expanding. Not a single rival had produced a worthy mechanical bandit in ages. Consequently, his crew engineered Money Honey, launching it into the wild by November 1963. This device became the earliest fully electromechanical gambling cabinet to completely dominate American casino floors. While German inventor Günter Wolf built similar hybrids throughout the 1950s, those models never breached stateside gambling venues. Money Honey succeeded by instantly curing a massive headache that floor managers had battled for decades. Handing out massive grand prizes previously demanded an employee standing nearby. Older gear could only spit out limited tokens before needing manual refills, forcing heavy staffing. Money Honey wiped that out. The motorized bin seamlessly paid 500 tokens alone, totally ditching employees and relying on electrical solenoids over traditional springs. Quicker, incredibly dependable, and a total breeze to upkeep, though they kept the classic handle. Just window dressing while electricity handled the heavy lifting. One worker now watched 50 cabinets multiplying floor capacity tenfold without extra budget. Packing extra games meant profits skyrocketed without adding overhead, generating purchase requests faster than Bally could build them. As the 1960s concluded, a staggering 9 out of 10 spinning games across Nevada gambling halls were Bally products. They dominated over 90% of the worldwide industry by fixing one single issue, prompting Lion Manufacturing to rebrand as Ball Manufacturing Corporation in March 1968. 12 months later, Bally hit the stock market and instantly spent that fresh cash. August 1969, they scooped up Midway Manufacturing in Schiller Park, an unimposing mechanical game shop that initially seemed low-key. That seemingly minor purchase ultimately became an incredibly game-changing power move for the brand. Buyouts continued. 1974 American Amusements Incorporated. 20 mall hubs became Aladdin's Castle. Buying Germany's Günter Wolf Automaten that same year unlocked both European and Asian territories. 1975 saw Bally Distributing acquired for $9.5 million. Soon 2,300 Chicagoans joined Ball. Earnings hit $200 million. From 1975 onward, the brand broke its own profit record 4 straight years. Yet a dark cloud hung over this success since Chicago's arcade scene had forever been rubbing elbows with the mafia. Builders heavily relied on distribution webs to place cabinets, and segments of those webs harbored mob ties stretching back generations hardwired into the industry's DNA. The ultimate reckoning hit in the late 1970s. Nevada's gaming watchdogs made a ballet executive step down due to his undeniable links with the criminal underworld. Australia's Moffat Royal Commission dragged O'Donnell in to answer for shady ties linking American and Australian betting rings. He openly admitted that Gerardo Cattina, a known Genovese mafia kingpin, flagged by feds, formerly owned BYD shares. O'Donnell claimed he repurchased them. By 1979, he was pushed out. Robert Lane took his spot. Numerous states weaponized that mafia history to stall or flat-out reject casino licenses. The very corporation that conquered American betting simply could not pass background checks in the exact space it helped invent. Pinball's glorious golden era. For 34 straight years, playing the silver ball was strictly outlawed throughout New York City. Not just restricted, banned. The prohibition started in January 1942 after Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia commanded crackdowns across every single borough. Cops confiscated almost 2,000 cabinets, utterly destroying them with massive sledgehammers. LaGuardia claimed to the press that operators were practically stealing kids' lunch funds. The game supposedly bred thugs. Chicago outlawed it. Los Angeles followed suit. The West Belmont plant manufactured goods that were literally a crime to enjoy in their own hometown. Everything shifted on April 2, 1976. Roger Sharp was a 26-year-old GQ journalist and easily among the top flipper wizards nationwide. The Amusement and Music Operators Association brought him in to speak before the New York City Council, proving the game relied on talent rather than blind luck. 2 Gotado cabinets sat right there in the chamber bank shot in El Dorado. Lawmakers heavily suspected El Dorado was rigged. They pointed Sharp toward Bankshot, a completely unfamiliar table, demanding he back up his claims on that one. So he boldly announced his next move. Right before launching, he warned the room exactly where the sphere was headed, aiming right down the middle chute. He let it rip. The silver sphere landed perfectly on target. Lawmakers voted 6-0. Chicago quickly matched the ruling. For the very first time in Bally's history, employees over at the West Belmont facility could finally enjoy their own handcrafted cabinets without breaking local laws in their hometown. That very year, the technology powering those cabinets shifted completely. Older electromechanical setups relied on countless moving pieces. Analog score wheels, brass chimes, and massive relay stacks managing every single bumper action. Whenever a glitch happened, repairmen had to hunt down the problem across countless identical wires. Upkeep was notoriously pricey and endless. By late 1973, Dave Nutting Associates pitched powering the tables using a microprocessor. Ross Shear at Ball wasn't buying it, neither was the rest of the industry. Nutting showed off a functional processor-driven device running on an Intel 4040 microchip on September 26, 1974. The concept succeeded. Bally secured the rights, bought out Nutting completely, and had the final product in stores by 1976. It was called Ball Freedom, marking the corporation's debut into solid-state gaming technology. Running on an AS2 518-17 circuit, it featured an 8-bit Motorola 6800 chip handling 60 lights and 19 coils. The incline shifted from 3 degrees to 6.5, speeding up gameplay considerably. Old physical dials were swapped for glowing gas plasma screens, while analog chimes became synthesized electronic sound effects. What came next completely shaped the era. 1975 brought Wizard making history as the premier pinball game featuring official pop culture branding, inspired by the movie Tommy. 1976 saw the launch of Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy showcasing Elton John's persona from his 1975 record. Moving 16,155 cabinets, it became a massive commercial hit among electromechanical platforms. By 1977, the billiards-inspired 8-ball, featuring Paul Ferris, illustrations sold 20,230 pieces. It became the top-selling cabinet ever, keeping that crown for 15 years. Concurrently, Evel Knievel moved 14,000 units. 1978 brought Playboy with 18,250 sales. 1979 delivered Kiss pushing 17,000 and Star Trek hitting 16,842. Harlem Globetrotters accounted for 14,550. Throughout 1979, American arcade makers moved a staggering 200,000 units, an achievement they'd duplicate. You could find these cabinets everywhere across America, from neighborhood pizza joints in taverns to bowling centers and flight terminals. Heavyweights like Bally, Gotado, Williams, and Stern were all based less than 30 kilometers apart in Chicago. Stern Pinball Zachary Sharp summed it up perfectly. The Windy City dominated arcade gaming exactly like Detroit ruled car manufacturing. Yet during that exact period, Bally gambled on a losing sector. Designed as a rival to the Atari 2600, the Valley Professional Arcade hit the scene in 1977. On paper, the specs were impressive: 256 colors, 4-channel sound, and an integrated basic coding system allowing players to write and store software on tapes. While Atari lacked that sheer processing muscle, they boasted massive software catalogs. Meanwhile, Bally barely had anything to play. Finding only a tiny niche, the system ultimately flopped. Consumers sent a very loud message: incredible tech without a game library isn't a real product, it's just a prototype. Not a single executive at Bally caught the crucial lesson hidden in that massive blunder. Chapter 6: Pac-Man Casinos and the Dangers of Branching Out Too Widely. When they bought Midway Manufacturing back in 1969, it barely made the news, just a little operation based out of Schiller Park, Illinois, churning out low-budget amusement devices. The brand basically collected dust in their corporate roster for years, pulling in slight profits while being completely ignored by the top brass. Everything changed once Midway began importing Japanese digital titles for gamers in the States. Midway brought Tito's Space Invaders over from Japan during 1978. That single release hauled in $133.9 million for Bally. Midway then partnered with Namco in 1980 to launch Pac-Man, which ultimately became the biggest-selling coin-op hit in history. Ms. Pac-Man dropped in 1982, which numerous arcade veterans consider the absolute peak of the coin-op entertainment era. Later that same year, Baby Pac-Man merged digital screens with traditional flipper mechanics right inside a single unit. It stood as the pioneering crossover device, merging both formats together for the very first time. Bal's Aladdin's Castle Entertainment Centers expanded massively, jumping from 20 spots in 1974 to 221 properties by late 1980. Looking purely at the spreadsheets, the underlying threat was masked completely. The explosive cash flow from Midway's digital titles easily covered up the harsh reality that physical cabinet sales were plummeting. With the offshoot printing money like that, no one felt pressured to acknowledge the dying core business. Red flags vanished beneath the most lucrative financial quarters Bally had ever seen. At the same time, Maloney had his sights fully set on Atlantic City. When New Jersey green-lit casinos in 1976, Bal wasted absolutely no time diving right in. They revealed blueprints for Bal's Park Place in 1977. However, the mob probe that pushed O'Donnell to resign in 1979 ended up stalling their permit. Park Place ultimately launched on December 29, 1979. It was way past the original deadline, but fully compliant. A massive threat arrived in 1985. Donald Trump scooped up 9.9% of Bal's shares publicly, heavily hinting at an aggressive corporate buyout. The businessman was already sitting on Trump Plaza in Trump's castle right there on the boardwalk. State regulations strictly prohibited anyone from holding more than 3 gambling venues locally. Snapping up Bally's Park Place would have maxed out his legal limit perfectly. Malone completely ruined that strategy with some clever maneuvering. He declared that Bally was purchasing the Golden Nugget Casino Hotel directly from Steve Wynn. Because Bally would control both Park Place and the Golden Nugget, a hostile buyout would suddenly dump 5 local venues into Trump's lap. That would instantly shatter state regulations. There was no way to absorb Bal without smashing right through the strict legal cap. Trump backed down completely. Malone later remarked, "Donald Trump is basically ancient history to us now." The whole situation was just an unlucky distraction. Their corporate shield held strong, but the massive financial hole they dug remained. From 1982 to 1986, Bally picked up several Six Flags theme parks in 1982 across New York, Texas, Georgia, New England, Missouri, and California. In 1983, Health and Tennis Corporation of America became Ballet Total Fitness. In 1985, Vegas's original MGM Grand Hotel and Casino became Bal's Las Vegas, currently operating as the Horseshoe Las Vegas. That year brought MGM Grand Reno, today's Grand Sierra Resort. By 1986, Atlantic City's Golden Nugget became Bal's Grand. 1986 also secured Scientific Games, a lottery terminal provider. Heavy borrowing funded every single acquisition. Yearly income surpassed $2 billion during the late 1980s. However, profit margins shrank so drastically that this impressive figure became completely meaningless. Borrowing costs devoured whatever actual profits these operations generated. The underlying flaw was incredibly obvious. An Illinois pinball manufacturer shares zero practical overlap with a Florida gym, a Texas amusement park, a Vegas gambling hall, or a Georgia lottery operation. They entirely lack common supply networks, mutual industry knowledge, and overlapping consumer bases. Malone's crew juggled engineering complex microprocessors running gambling floors, amusement park security, and gym property management. Not a single executive present possessed profound expertise beyond one solitary field. Digital poker perfectly highlights these missed opportunities. This format exploded across gambling halls precisely when Bally already possessed the production capabilities, crucial gambling ties, and technical engineering skills to completely dominate that sector. Malone ignored it entirely, distracted by recreational facilities. A rival ultimately seized that space. A market analyst perfectly captured this repeating cycle. Bal's strategy involves spotting any profitable venture run by others and grabbing a slice. This exact tactic ultimately gave birth to Money Honey. It drove the Midway buyout and relentless expansion from 1982 through 1986. It generated massive liabilities. These purchase companies were legitimate. The financial burdens required to buy them were equally genuine. Unlike an arcade cabinet, borrowed cash demands payment long after you step away. Chapter 7. Lights go out at the Belmont plant. The popular narrative explaining pinball's ultimate downfall is incredibly straightforward. Digital arcades murdered the format. That explanation isn't exactly incorrect. It simply lacks vital context. Financial realities of operating amusement centers turned hostile toward flipper games before customers ever did. Digital gaming units occupied much smaller footprints while demanding significantly fewer repairs. Whenever a specific game lost its appeal, owners simply replaced the motherboard, providing an inexpensive solution that kept their equipment consistently profitable. Mechanical tables were permanent physical objects. Once their themes grew unpopular, those entire units became basically obsolete without offering any secondary purpose. Units were dumped to budget arcades, passed down again, and scrapped. Digital games offered simple modernization paths, whereas mechanical tables only suffered steady financial depreciation. At-home consoles added fresh pressure. Atari 2600 hit during 1977, then in television in 1979. Throughout the early 1980s, teens gamed at home for free rather than dumping their loose change into local public machines. Commercial game rooms lost that demographic battle against an entire generation in barely 36 months. Silver ball machines also demanded a trait. Digital ones lacked extreme patience. Mastering them involved genuine dedication, perfecting bumps, learning timings, and memorizing physics over countless sessions. Meanwhile, anyone could easily enjoy Space Invaders on Coin 1. In business settings demanding rapid customer rotation, simpler games naturally prevailed. Between 1979 and 1982, sector sales plummeted by 85%. 200,000 in 1979, 30,000 3 years later. These manufacturers committed no actual mistakes. Consumers simply stopped purchasing entirely, and Ball completely lacked any solid countermeasures. Between 1978 and 1982, manufacturing left Belmont Avenue for Midway's complex in Franklin Park, Illinois. During February 1982, Bally started constructing a specialized flipper game facility located in Bensonville, Illinois. Construction finished during 1983. However, by the time its doors finally swung open, the entire industry had imploded. Bally dedicated 2 solid years to erecting this brand new plant, only to watch it officially launch during the absolute lowest trough of the market's most brutal historical crash. Before manufacturing fully merged into Midway, the final cabinets rolling out of Bensonville were Speakeasy Baby Pac-Man and BMX. Baby Pac-Man, dropping in 1982, tried bridging this massive gap. It featured one combined chassis housing both digital monitors and mechanical playfields, forcing users to switch formats mid-game. Mechanical enthusiasts considered the digital elements an annoying distraction, whereas digital arcade lovers viewed the physical flippers as frustrating roadblocks. Neither demographic felt truly satisfied, technologically daring yet financially lifeless. During 1982, Bally folded its mechanical gaming arm straight into Ball/Midway, effectively terminating flipper games as an independent corporate department. By June 1983, central leadership relocated to a high-rise at 8700 West Belmont Avenue near O'Hare Airport. Top executives abandoned the gritty northern industrial district for a sleek suburban tower. This move effectively served as a geographical declaration detailing exactly where corporate priorities now resided. Throughout 1984, Bally liquidated 2640 West Belmont Avenue. That location anchored their entire identity for almost 50 years. They completely offloaded it without any sentimental fanfare. Briefly, a carriage company named Maloney Coach Builders set up shop there. That moniker was just by chance completely unrelated to the founding family. Over the next 10 years, the property bounced between various owners. Eventually, wrecking crews tore it down in 1997. Upscale residential units took its spot. Today, you won't find a single monument sign or trace at the Belmont and Rockwell intersection showing its past. As for that iconic Bally mascot, that 8-foot radioactive statue originally on the western edge was rescued from the rubble by arcade creator John Popadiuk right before destruction. Bally additionally ran a Belgian outpost over in Antwerp, known as Bally Continental Limited, an 84,000 square foot facility manufacturing slot machines, alongside bingo-style cabinets and air hockey setups destined for buyers across Europe, Asia, and South Africa. This overseas branch kept running totally separate from the Windy City downsizing. Ultimately, the United States Postal Service bought up the Franklin Park location, transforming the space to manufacture and repair those standard white delivery tubs utilized by postal workers nationwide. Thus, the very factory that pumped out 8-Ball and Evel Knievel was reborn as a government supply hub. Bally Midway kept churning out arcade cabinets until 1988, though their output was a shadow of its former glory. Even during this late era, the release titles proved their engineering team hadn't lost their touch. Back in 1980, Xenon broke new ground as the absolute pioneer in utilizing artificial female vocal tracks. Releases like Centaur and Embryon in 1981 showcased massive artistic drive. However, with the industry collapsing around them, these innovations failed to boost sales. By 1987, Bally offloaded their Six Flags properties just to help cover massive buyout loans. Then in 1988, they separated their casino arm into Bally Gaming International. Concurrently, leadership auctioned off Bally Midway, the entire pinball operation. The video cabinet catalog alongside licensing privileges for the Bally trademark on entertainment gear straight over to WMS Industries. The corporate umbrella over Williams Electronics, a workshop launched with pennies back in 1932, producing games woven into the fabric of American culture for 50 years. Representing 56 solid years of Windy City production, was abruptly handed to a massive rival purely to settle financial obligations. Chapter 8. Selling off their soul. During 1988, Bally Manufacturing gave up the exact product line that originally put them on the map. That meant dumping Bally Midway, abandoning their flipper game sector, liquidating the coin-op divisions. unloading 56 years' worth of mechanical patents and designs, and granting WMS Industries, the overarching entity running Williams Electronics, full permission to slap the Bally logo on future entertainment releases. That very same calendar year, their 221-unit Aladdin's Castle franchise, fueled by the Pac-Man craze, was individually auctioned to Namco, eventually becoming Namco Cybertainment. Furthermore, 1988 saw their gambling division, Bally Gaming International, break away to operate completely on its own. The Six Flags theme parks were already liquidated back in 1987 to satisfy massive loan burdens. Merely 2 years later, from the theme parks and Aladdin's Castle to Bally Midway and their gambling sector, ownership completely gutted the massive empire they had spent 10 years carefully constructing. All that survived the purge were a few resort casinos, alongside a fitness franchise linked together solely through massive financial deficits and a corporate title. A particular footnote regarding that WMS buyout really stands out, though. Following the takeover, Williams deliberately kept slapping the Bally trademark onto about 50% of their new arcade launches. Cabinets bearing that iconic logo hit casino floors right up until 1999, long after the original corporation had totally abandoned the entertainment sector. Average players feeding coins into those cabinets were completely oblivious that the actual creators were long out of the picture. The trademark simply outlasted the actual corporation. This staying power truly speaks to the incredible foundation Maloney established back in 1932, proving its influence carried on way after operations officially shut down. The economic reasoning driving these massive liquidations was incredibly straightforward. Bally funded their massive buying spree from 1982 through 1986 almost exclusively through hefty loans. Unfortunately, the properties they grabbed, like Park Place and Bally's Las Vegas, along with their Grand Resort in Atlantic City and the MGM Grand Reno, just weren't pulling in enough cash to cover those massive mortgage payments. Fast forward to 1988, and the corporation had already missed several crucial banking deadlines. By 1990, the Chicago Tribune openly stated that Bally was breaching loan agreements while utterly bombing in the gambling sector. Plus, there was one more devastating misstep. Executives heavily banked on scoring the Illinois State Lottery gig for major income planning to leverage the Scientific Games network they purchased in 1986. Instead, local officials handed that lucrative deal over to a massive rival. Missing out on that bid blew a massive hole right through the financial forecasts, anchoring their entire mountain of debt. Flipper cabinets and coin-op machines became the easiest assets to dump simply due to their rapid market liquidity. Buyers were eager and totally funded, making negotiations a breeze. Ironically, the very department defining their corporate soul proved quickest to liquidate during a fiscal emergency. That brutal irony perfectly summarizes 1988. Eventually, on May 14, 1989, the Chicago Tribune published a poignant message penned by Don Maloney, the original Pioneer's kid. He noted that following 58 years, Bally was pulling 1,000 jobs out of Illinois. He pointed the finger at state leadership instead of blaming corporate executives. He criticized short-sighted politicians who kept their seats despite driving away massive employers and wreaking sheer economic havoc. His primary complaints centered around a dropped lottery deal and strict regulations, which ultimately turned Nevada into the smartest choice for Bally's upcoming construction. This specific geographic shift holds deep historical significance. Back in 1951, Raymond Maloney pushed back against moving out to Nevada even as fellow Chicago plant owners fled there, dodging the Johnson Act. Boosting profits wasn't worth slashing 500 local rolls to him, yet 38 years later, his own son published an article confirming that exact transition. 1,000 positions shifted from Chicago to Nevada, happening long after his dad had died. The Tribune published a front-page headline mourning Bally's departure, officially marking the end of an era. Everything that happened next was heavily calculated. By 1990, top stakeholder Arthur Goldberg assumed control to overhaul operations. During 1991, Bally Wolf, a German offshoot bought in 1974, spun off entirely on its own. By 1993, Bally completely dropped Scientific Games Life Fitness and the Reno Casino, previously the MGM Grand and currently Grand Sierra Resort. Later that December in 1993, they launched Bal's Saloon and Gambling Hall, a floating casino at Hoon Landing in Mississippi, hunting for fresh profits without so much historical baggage. Moving into 1994, the corporation officially rebranded itself as Bally Entertainment. They completely ditched the term manufacturing, making their title truthful at last, since they didn't actually produce physical goods anymore. What stayed behind was strictly a gaming enterprise, frantically dumping a gym division that had always felt completely out of place. Around that time, leadership declared their intention to break Ballet Total Fitness, turning it into a separate public stock. Come 1996, Hilton Hotels Corporation totally absorbed Ballet Entertainment. Ultimately, a hospitality giant focused solely on booking suites for travelers, took control of the empire. Raymond Maloney originally sparked using a leased blueprint in a 1932 publication cover. The deal quietly wrapped up with Hilton's gambling branch, effortlessly swallowing all of Bal's gaming locations. As a standalone business, they were entirely finished since the Belmont plant was already long gone. Somebody else owned the slot games entirely, the amusement centers had vanished, and the workout facilities were getting spun out. Theme parks were auctioned off 9 years prior. Therefore, Hilton essentially just purchased properties located inside betting zones, bearing a familiar logo slapped right over the entrance. That iconic brand was literally all that survived. Chapter 9, The Total Collapse of an Industry. Following the 1988 buyout of Midway, Williams kept the brand alive. WMS simply divided their arcade launches between two distinct lines, Williams and Bally. Both originated straight out of 341 North California Avenue locally. Consumers saw two separate identities, but internally a single crew facility and production line handled everything. The real difference was just advertising. Both cabinets essentially belonged to a unified operation, and during the early 1990s, that group built arguably the greatest arcade hardware ever made. 1992's The Addams Family sold 20,270 units, crushing 8-Ball's 15-year dominance to crown itself the highest-selling arcade game ever created, a massive title it holds on to today. Crafted by Pat Lawler, it pioneered DOT matrix screens, completely phasing out the older gas plasma readouts from earlier models. Fans loved Thing, an automated hand built right into the board that would literally grab the silver sphere during specific rounds. Authentic movie stars actually recorded all the custom voice lines. Whether looking at sales or innovation, it represented the absolute peak. Lawler then dropped Twilight Zone in 1993. Pushing 15,235 boxes, it seriously lacked Addams Family's smooth accessibility. Instead, Twilight Zone proved incredibly complex and brutally tough, boasting hidden magnetic kickers on an upper deck and a candy dispenser throwing bonus spheres into play, alongside a lightweight ceramic power orb that rolled completely unlike your typical steel offering. Enthusiasts regularly rank it among the most mechanically demanding games ever built. 1991 through 1995 also birthed heavy hitters like Indiana Jones, Terminator, Two Medieval, Madness, Fishtails, and others. These units pack serious processing muscle and far superior graphics compared to anything seen previously. Developers finally gained access to top-tier equipment, yet that couldn't halt the inevitable crash. The entire market kept shriveling up no matter how impressive the games got. Iconic brands defining American pinball were shuttering well before WMS eventually folded. Stern Electronics, managed by Gary and Sam Stern, folded completely back in 1984. Dropped in 1982, their ultimate release, Orbiter 1, remains the sole table ever built, featuring a sloping bowl layout completely redefining the physics of gameplay. That unique feature was never duplicated. After running steadily from the dawn of the 1930s, Chicago Coins shut its doors for good right then. Gotaudo stuck around longer. Founded in 1927, this crew essentially birthed the modern coin-op pinball vibe. They introduced flippers via Humpty Dumpty in 1947, keeping the lights on for 69 straight years. Their swan song was Barbed Wire, debuting in 1996 before the enterprise folded shortly thereafter. Fast forward to the fall of 1999, and WMS Industries axed their flipper department despite holding a massive 80% grip on worldwide sales. Holding a virtual monopoly, the parent brass decided the gig just wasn't worth continuing. The root cause was purely structural. Their casino and video gaming branches netted much fatter margins off far simpler hardware. Pinball demanded thousands of tiny physical parts per cabinet, requiring heavy manual labor, specialized engineering, and huge upfront funding for every fresh release. Moving 10,000 boxes was actually a massive home run. Meanwhile, a digital casino cabinet could easily be mass-produced for a tiny fraction of that extra expense. Ironically, their toughest item to build, yielded the poorest financial returns. Right before the axe fell, the crew got one final mission. Totally flipped the script. Welcome to Pinball 2000. They beamed digital graphics onto reflective glass over the play area, making it look like the steel sphere was hitting holographic targets. It surprisingly clicked. They led with Revenge from Mars, followed by Star Wars Episode 1. Then WMS pulled the plug just 2 entries deep. The grand plan to rescue the industry died after a pair of releases. Before the shutdown, the final cabinet bearing the iconic B badge was 1997's NBA Fast Break. It remains the sole table ever made that awarded points mirroring an actual basketball game. You got 2 for a regular hit and 3 from downtown. Racking up a cool 100 and required serious talent, borrowing a math scheme straight off the hardwood. The economic pressures driving the collapse were highly specific and had been snowballing for years. Crafting a cabinet in 1998 meant manually wiring endless switches, coils, plastic hills, kicker rings, moving gadgets, and glowing inserts. You couldn't automate that process at the production volumes a dying consumer base could actually support. Building each unit cost an absolute fortune. The buyer pool kept drying up too. That brutal mismatch meant zero cash left over to fund the creative design needed to keep fresh concepts flying off the line and hot. PlayStation launched during 1994, Nintendo 64 dropped in 1996. In just one console cycle, living rooms suddenly boasted tech that used to demand bulky commercial arcade cabinets. Once we crossed that digital line, the general public lost every reason to head out and drop quarters. The exact crowd that amusement centers relied on simply vanished. Even within the hardcore community, the biggest fans preferred hunting down vintage tables instead of dropping cash on brand new stuff. A hobbyist grabbing a 1977 8-ball from a private seller did absolutely zero for WMS. Nor did it help distributors or the factories churning out modern games. The hobby's most loyal fan base was basically recycling older gear just to stay afloat. The diehards only stuck around because flipping offers a raw physical rush that zero flat screens can ever duplicate. Solid steel, a truly mechanical layout, totally unpredictable, demanding intense reflexes and genuine real-time precision. You just can't code that kind of authentic tactile feedback, and the true believers are the sole reason the hobby weathered such a massive, devastating storm. The magic is legit. The fan base survives, but it sure isn't 1979 anymore, nor will it ever be. Chapter 10. The title remains. The physical machine vanished. Post up at Belmont and Rockwell right now, and nothing hints at what used to sit there. Zero plaques, no historical tributes, absolutely no signage. The condos replacing 2,640 West Belmont Avenue in 1997 perfectly match every other Chicago block. Current residents probably have zero clue about the legendary address they actually moved into. 50 straight years of flipper history rolled off those exact floors. Now the soil is silent. Over at 3041 North California Avenue, the spot building Williams and Ballet decks, post-1988, where the Addams Family and Twilight Zone originally shipped, has sat totally empty and up for sale for ages. One surviving Valley plant in Bensonville still stands currently occupied by classic Midwest die mold. Absolutely nothing outside hints at its magical arcade past. The massive industrial network responsible for America's most beloved amusement devices has been completely torn down, repurposed, or left to rot. Just one single manufacturer actually survived. Elk Grove Village's own Stern Pinball owes its very beginning to that crash. Back in 1999, right when WMS closed their arcade branch, Gary Stern launched his fresh endeavor. Sam, his dad, previously held half the ownership at Williams Electronics. Gary worked in the trade since adolescence. As WMS backed out, Stern stepped up. Jersey Jack Pinball hit the scene in 2011. While American Pinball and Spooky Pinball run more modest setups, the classic game completely lives on. However, the original manufacturing sector died out. Bally's moniker experienced a weirder legacy than most domestic trademarks. Bally Gaming International, which broke away in 1988, eventually got bought out by Alliance Gaming in 1996, became Bally Technologies by 2006. Scientific Games scooped it up in 2014 for $3.3 billion and another $1.8 billion in liabilities, and it now functions under Light and Wonder. That title was officially taken on by Scientific Games during 2022. The branding born from a 1932 arcade cabinet currently flashes across Vegas digital slots. Meanwhile, Bally Total Fitness auctioned off gyms wholesale. LA Fitness in 2011, Blast Fitness in 2012, 24-Hour Fitness in 2014. The final gym shut down during October 2016. By 2020, Twin River Holdings snatched up the Bally's label and completely renamed themselves Bally's Corporation. After scoring the permit to run Chicago's premier legit gambling hub, the firm touted the move as a glorious return, but truly only the title came home. That founding enterprise is totally gone. Looking at 2025, four entirely different groups feature Bally somewhere within their business titles. Not a single one shares actual equity management ties or historical roots with Bally Manufacturing Corporation, West Belmont Avenue, or even Raymond Maloney. It remains purely an acquired logo completely severed from the rich past that initially made it profitable. Such a stark disconnect offers a pretty glaring takeaway from this whole saga. Bally's current multi-billion-dollar worth stems directly from those goods produced down on West Belmont from 1935 until 1984. Its massive societal impact tying it deeply into regular civic life across the nation, along with 50 years of flashing bulbs and chimes filling communal hangouts everywhere, sprouted from crafting arcade tables right in Chicago. They didn't build their legacy on fitness centers or gambling halls, just classic flipper games. That exact merchandise corporate bosses threw away back in 1988 actually fuels the label's lasting worth. Here are 6 blunt lessons drawn straight from these events. First off, whenever a side hustle starts outperforming your main gig, red flags in the primary market typically get brushed off. Midway's massive video game profits during 1981 completely masked the brutal plunge in flipper cabinet purchases. A single department's booming wealth essentially bankrolled the abandonment of the other. Second, branching out into completely unrelated fields isn't a clever game plan. It merely lumps disconnected projects together under shared loans. An arcade manufacturer, a Vegas gambling resort, a Florida gym network, and some Texas amusement park offers zero mutual insights. When you fund it all through heavy borrowing, the entire package turns into a massive burden. Third, taking out loans to buy companies means those new assets must out-earn their interest rates. If they fail, your whole corporate umbrella takes a hit all at once. The buying spree between 1982 and 1986 allowed zero room for financial slip-ups. Once the betting floors tanked and the state lotto deal vanished, leadership had to frantically liquidate properties everywhere immediately. Number 4, financially squeezed businesses always dump their easiest-to-sell properties beforehand. During 1988, Bally's entertainment branch was their most sellable chunk. An eager purchaser stepped up, they hammered out a fast figure, and the paperwork wrapped up smoothly. They essentially dumped the very department that made them famous simply because it offered the quickest payout during a brutal cash crunch. Fifth lesson: societal impact doesn't easily translate to pure spreadsheet numbers. Bally's moniker originally held deep communal meaning. It grew over countless decades while millions of folks played their cabinets at local hangouts. Offloading that entertainment arm just to pay down gambling debts basically treated a beloved heritage piece like scrap. Sure, the brand lived on, but the soul attached to it never transferred to the new owners. Finally, number 6 brings up a lingering unknown. Had Bally avoided borrowing heavily to enter markets completely unrelated to their main focus? If they just stuck to arcade boxes and a matching gambling sector, might the classic flipper scene have endured somehow differently? The pressures that killed off arcades dwarfed any solo corporation. Household consoles, changing hobbies, and the sheer cost of building physical parts during a computerized age played massive roles. Bally didn't invent those hurdles. Their corporate moves sped up the inevitable, but they weren't solely responsible for everything. History simply details the raw facts. A manufacturing plant churning out wildly adored amusement devices got totally leveled. A label forged through 56 years of hardcore Chicago production currently exists as a gambling logo held by strangers. Those iconic tables that once jammed every inch of regular domestic society have faded into a tiny niche hobby today. Today at Belmont and Rockwell, nothing remembers what stood there.